Hello, I'm Cecilia Fragakis, and I'm joined today by Vince Anter, founder and host of V is for Vino. He is also a DePaul alum. So today we are going to talk a little bit about his show, some Chicago wine pairings, and a quick round of this or that wine edition. So hello, Vince. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Yes. So to start, I just want to ask, how did you get into wine?
Yeah, well, I initially had moved to Los Angeles right after I went to DePaul, and I was trying to be a rock star. But in LA, there's a lot of people trying to be rock stars, and so while I was doing that, I was paying my way through college or through that career rather with bars and restaurants. But I also actually worked in Chicago in college and in restaurants too. And I slowly, as I started falling out of the music, I started falling into wine. I just found it was kind of the same part of the brain. In fact, you'll find a lot of ex-musicians who are really into wine. I think it's just that same part of the brain, that kind of creative meets, technical. And so I went and I took my certified sommelier exam, which is a 3-part exam. It is a written part, so a theory, service exam where you serve a master som who's kind of like the top of this organization. There's more astronauts in the world than there are master sommeliers right now. And then you do a blind tasting where you have to take a wine, smell it without knowing what it is, and say what it is. And I went through all that and it was fine for me, but I found that there was kind of no way for average consumers to learn about wine. And so that's kind of how the show was born, as I went through that exam and wanted to create something that was a little more accessible.
Okay. Do you want to go into more of how you started to create your show?
Yeah, exactly. So I started, with this kind of idea. I went through that process, like I said, with the exam. And, I found that nobody was doing the Bourdain of wine. The Bourdain meets Alton Brown of wine. And most importantly, nobody was combining travel with wine. Wine is unlike, I think, most beverages in the world. It is really, really, really tied to place. I always say I could get a beer. If I got the ingredients for Guinness, for instance, and I wanted to make it here in America, as long as I had the ingredients in the recipe, I could get really close. But I can't do that with wine because wine is tied to the place it comes from through something called terroir. This is basically all the elements of weather and rainfall and sunshine and all the elements of place. And so I was like, there needs to be somebody who's going to these places and telling these stories about wine. And I had this unique set of skills. From DePaul, I had an interactive media degree and an international business degree. I now had the wine knowledge because I'd taken that exam, and I was comfortable on camera from years of doing the music and just, being in front of the camera. And so we bootstrapped the first season, got it out there, and it was fairly successful. And we've been able to kind of get sponsorship for our seasons ever since.
Okay. What's your favorite part about creating and hosting your show?
Yeah, I mean, I love it's like any other entrepreneurial venture. There's parts you love and there's parts you hate. And sometimes those are the same things and it just depends on the context. So for instance, I love, my favorite part's obviously filming the show, traveling, going there. I mean, I think that's the end all be all for me when it comes to the show. But then again, there's times you're on the road and traveling and you're exhausted and you kind of just want to be home. And, there's so much that needs to go right. And you're managing, the crews there. And, you have these people you're interviewing and everybody has expectations. And so it is definitely my favorite part, but it's a lot of work as well. But I love all of it. I mean, I get to plan the episodes from start to finish. It's all our creative vision because we run off sponsorships. So we're not actually produced by a production company. So we're the production company. And so we get to plan, what do we want to talk about? Who do we want to interview? What topics do we want to show? And that planning phase is also really fun for me.
Do you have a favorite place that you've visited while shooting your show?
Yeah, while shooting the show, actually, we just did most of our episodes in Portugal this last year. And in Europe this last year. All 7 episodes that we're doing, almost all of them are in Europe, with the exception of the one Chicago episode, which I can talk about later. But we did Portugal and 2 episodes in Portugal. And it really is just an incredible country. The people are super friendly. They all speak English, which I never look for when I go to a foreign country. I don't expect anybody to speak English, but if they do, I mean, obviously it's just really, really helpful. They're excited to kind of show you their culture. The food is amazing. It's affordable. It's a compact enough country that you can see a lot of it all in one trip. And yet you only have to go, an hour up the road and you're a completely different area, from beach to mountains to major cities. It's a really wonderful country.
It sounds like it. Going back to Chicago, what wine would you pair with a deep dish pizza?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked. So one of the episodes we did was actually a Chicago episode. And we do some of these pairings. So I get more in depth on these pairings in the episode, but we did pizza. And I actually got to hang out with Mark Malnati of Lou Malnati's Pizza, which is my personal favorite deep dish. I know there's like a war, but Lou's is for me. Anyway, I love Santa Barbara Syrah with deep dish, especially if you've got the sausage on there, because that sausage has this kind of meatiness. Syrah has this kind of meaty, peppery thing going on. It's a nice, hearty red wine, but it's not so big like a big, let's say Napa Cabernet, where it doesn't have any acidity to kind of stand up to the acid that's going on in the pizza, because the pizza has a lot of tomatoes. Tomatoes have acid, and so you need some acid in your wine. And Santa Barbara is a kind of high acid. It's a cooler climate wine region. So Santa Barbara Syrah, which is a sub-region of California, that's where I'd go.
Okay. What wine would you pair with a Chicago style hot dog?
Yeah, I would definitely do. So you want something, once again, you're going to hear me say this a lot. Acidity in wine is a good thing. It helps wines pair a little easier. So something high acid, because you got this fatty hot dog, and you've got this kind of tangy high acid relish on there, the green relish they put. And so I went with a Gruner Veltliner, which is a Austrian grape. They're actually pretty common. They're super affordable. They're good. They're zippy. They're crisp. They're perfect. Like if I think about it, if I'm having a Chicago dog, like maybe I'm having it like watching a game or in like a summer afternoon. And so I think Gruner is like a perfect summer afternoon wine too.
Okay, that sounds like really good. Lastly, what wine would you pair with an Italian style beef sandwich?
Yeah. Well, once again, you have this kind of fatty dish, right? And I want acid to cut through all that fat. So I told you, you're going to hear me say it a couple times. I also too, if you're getting it spicy, I get them spicy. Personally, I like mine with the hot Giardinera. So I'm going with a Lambrusco, which is a like off dry. It's actually a sparkling red wine, which I know is kind of funky, but it's really fun. It's kind of big, flowy, wishy-washy bubbles that'll cut through the heaviness of this big kind of meaty sandwich. And it's a red wine, so it stands up to all the beef that you have on there. So Lambrusco, which is a wine that is in northeastern Italy area, and it's really affordable too. So all the wines we do actually on the show, you can find at Binny's, which obviously there's a million of them here in Chicagoland. And you can find some Lambruscos there too. And it's a really fun wine. Definitely one I'd encourage. You can get them great Lambruscos for like under $15.
Ooh, that's interesting. I may have to check it out. I also wanted to get to know you more and kind of do a quick round of this or that wine edition.
Sure.
So white or red wine?
I know everybody always asks me that when they do this. And I can't pick. I have to say that it depends on what I'm eating. I'm big on pairing your wines with food. I mean, that's normally how we drink wine, right? Is with food. So it all depends on what I'm eating. But if you put a gun to my head, I'd actually probably say white wine because it pairs with more food. Red wines can be a little tougher depending on how big they are. And I love the world of white wine.
Do you prefer sweet or dry wine?
Definitely dry. I mean, I think once you kind of get into wine a little more, you'll find that you enjoy dry wine just for the sake of, if I want to have more than one glass, I don't want something that's got a ton of sugar in it. But I do love a good sweet wines. Dessert wines are one of the most underrated wine categories out there. So I'm not hating on sweet wines. I just prefer dry.
Do you prefer fruity notes or more oaky notes?
I would actually say when you say fruity or oaky, I'd probably say oaky / earthy. So kind of the way we sometimes break down those topics is actually fruity or earthy, and it's old New World or Old World wines. So we say New World wines tend to be fruit forward, right? Places, Australia, New Zealand, America, all these places that are part of the New World, they have fruit forward wines. And then Old World is pretty much anything in Europe, Portugal, France, Spain, Italy. And those tend to be more earthy. And me personally, I like more earthy wines. They're kind of funky. They taste like the dirt they came from. But I also love, I love New World wines too. So I would say, both would make me pick kind of earthy, oaky wines.
Okay. Do you prefer low or high tannin in your wine?
I prefer low tannin because tannin is a kind of a tough thing to pair. Just going back to the pairing thing, the only thing it really pairs with high tannin wines are fatty foods. Like that's why you see all the time you'll get Cabernet Sauvignon with steak. You get a fatty steak like a ribeye. A Cabernet Sauvignon is perfect. But the other good thing tannin does is it helps the wine age. And so I would say if the wine is aged, I'll take the tannin wine because as the wine ages, the tannin actually mellows out. But if I'm having a young wine, I don't really want a lot of tannin in it because it's a little easier to pair.
Okay. Do you prefer domestic or imported wine?
Yeah, well, that kind of went back to the fruity, earthy. But yeah, I tend to prefer imported wine. But there's some great, domestic wine regions too. I actually skew away from some of the bigger, richer styles that I think are pretty popular. I like some leaner style wines, and so Santa Barbara, California, is a favorite place of mine. Wines coming out of Oregon are really amazing. There's actually some great wines coming out of the Finger Lakes in New York. Again, cool climate wines, a little leaner. So those are kind of some of my favorite New World wine regions, but it all depends. I can go either way.
And then lastly, just out of curiosity, do you prefer a classic wine glass or a stemless wine glass?
Oh, I definitely prefer classic. I don't like stemless because the whole point of the stem is you can hold from here or here so that you don't heat up the wine with your hands when you swirl, because the wine does have a serving temperature that it would be probably pretty good for you to follow. It just helps you get more enjoyment out of the glass. By the way, it's an easy trick for that. If you're drinking wine, my rule is put red wines into the fridge 30 minutes before you want to drink them, and take white wines out of the fridge 30 minutes before you want to drink them, because we tend to drink our white wines too cold and our red wines too warm. And so getting them at that right temperature really just helps you get more out of it. But anyway, yeah, I like the stems because then I don't heat up the glass.
Very interesting. I have a couple more personal just questions for you. Do you have a favorite wine or a wine you drink pretty often?
Yeah, I mean, I have, man, that's a tough one. Because like I said, I drink all over depending on what I'm pairing and what I'm into. I'm a big fan of a certain region, specific regions. So I tend to like a Rioja in Spain is one of my favorite regions. It's an old world Spanish region that has a lot of value, and you can get wines that have been aged for you, like maybe 10 plus years for fairly cheap. So I really like Rioja. I like Syrah a lot. I actually mentioned earlier Santa Barbara Syrah, and that's one of my favorite styles of wine made. And then like most winos, I tend to like Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. Those are kind of the two end goals for most winos, is they get into the Burgundian grapes, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And you can kind of pair anything with, if you have those two wines in your arsenal, and those grapes are so versatile. And so I do drink a lot of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir from all over the world. I don't have a specific region that I prefer. I just love to see how those grapes express themselves.
Do you have a favorite wine pairing?
Yeah, fried chicken and champagne. One of the best ones out there for sure. Fried chicken or fried anything, like French fries and champagne is awesome. Even buffalo wings, as long as they're not too spicy with champagne. Anything fried in champagne works really well.
Okay, that's a really interesting answer. Was not expecting it. And then I'm not sure if the science sort of backs up the popular idea that a glass of wine a day has many benefits, but I'm curious to know, as a dedicated wine lover, how often do you have a glass of wine?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's not many days that go by where I don't have. I'm a cocktail enthusiast too, and so I usually have a cocktail, a glass of wine. And I like a good beer now and then too. So there's rarely a day that goes by where I don't at least have some sort of beverage. And I don't know, there's just something about like the reward of having that glass of wine, and especially when you first open the bottle It's my most favorite, exciting part when you don't know what the wine's going to bring, right? And so you pour it in your glass, and that first sniff when you don't know what's going to happen, that's really exciting to me. So most days I try and give myself that.
Is there a best time of day to drink wine?
I mean, I'm an evening guy. I've never been a day drink guy. In fact, I don't mind even like starting like fairly late. I eat dinner late. I don't eat dinner till like 8:30, 9 o'clock. I've always just been that way. And so I'm an evening guy, but there's plenty of people who love to, have a boozy brunch, if you will, and power to you if that's what you want to do.
Yeah. Lastly, if DePaul was a wine, what kind of wine would it be?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'd have to say it's similar to like a Pinot Noir because Pinot Noir is both has this history, but is also reinventing itself constantly. I think DePaul is a very well-renowned school for what it's done and its intention, mission, and values. But at the same time, it's always looking to improve. And it kind of goes with everything. My DePaul journey has been with me. Like I said, a lot of the skills I learned, including I did a study abroad that really was the catalyst for me wanting to travel. That happened at DePaul, and that stayed with me. And Pinot Noir is one of those wines that you'll take with you your whole life, and you'll never learn everything about it. So I'd say Pinot Noir.
What study abroad trip did you do at DePaul?
I was gone for a year in half the year in Lyon, France, half the year in Linköping, Sweden. So I was gone for a full year. And then all the European students who I studied with, they came to America for a year. It was a really cool 2-year program called Atlantis. I think they still do it in the CDM school.
Did you have a favorite part of doing that study abroad?
Oh man, I mean, all of it. I mean, it was the catalyst for the rest of my life. I think as far as it really I'd never left the country and opened my eyes to how much I want to do that. I did take a road trip at the end with a couple of my buddies who had come from DePaul. And we did a road trip all the way from Sweden down to southern Italy and back. And I think that was the favorite part, was just getting on the road and, really exploring the culture in a way that if you fly into major cities, you can't do. But if you drive from place to place, that's when you really see a place. And so I always try and take a road trip if I'm in a new country.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I had. So thank you for joining me today. Where can viewers watch your show and connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really active on social media, especially Instagram at V is for Vino, VISFORVINO. The show can be watched on visforvino.com. It can be watched on Roku, on Amazon Prime, on YouTube. So we're pretty easy to find. But if you go to visforvino.com, all the platforms we're on can be found there too.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed this.